So, why are we doing this kind of interview, in this format, in this way? I've known Tommy for a while, and one of his jobs at King is that he gets a lot of interviews. But I've never really seen an interview where it's like people from the game business kind of talking to someone else in the game business. It's always been like formal BBC, all these fancy places, and they're always asking more corporate questions, but Tommy's a really interesting person. So I asked to have a session where just kind of like talking about him, his background, and more about King, coming more from an industry point of view versus like a money and stock market point of view. So Jessica said okay, and we have now 45 minutes to just talk about Tommy and his background. So the first question is more about you. And your background, because you're actually an inspiration to me. You've been in the business forever. You have a nickname, Tommy Java Palm, right? Tommy Danger Palm. But so just tell us more about yourself. Where are you from? What's your background? Why are you in games?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm from Stockholm, Sweden. I've been extremely passionate about game development ever since the age of about 12, when I had a Commodore 64 and learned programming on that, and programmed with some friends making games. I've continued doing that on a hobby level until the end of the 90s when I started my first game development company. Called Jadestone. And then in 2009 I founded Fabrication Games that King acquired in 2012 together with Alexander Ekvall, the technical director.
What was like the big game at Jadestone? Was it called Jadestone?
Yeah, our first game was a war strategy game called World in War, but the first big game that we made was a football manager game, online multiplayer, mostly for web, but we had some mobile extensions to it. But it was, at that time, impossible to get those things working, especially with a business model around it.
Cool. And what about Fabrication Games? That was a mobile company.
Yeah, so Jadestone eventually went more over to gambling. So that's where we took the mobile content that had been developed by Jadestone and continued with that in Fabrication Games and focused solely on making cross-platform games. That's what we figured would be big in the future.
Okay, cool. But I want to keep talking more about. So this was like a 20-year period or a 15-year period.
Yeah, basically, from the end of the 90s.
So I started my company with my co-founder 4 years ago now. What were some of the high points? What were the low points in that period?
Yeah, they were often kind of tightly connected. I started Jadestone straight out of school, and there was no money backing whatsoever. So it was basically just on me and some of the guys early on being able to live on very little money, and we really blown away originally when we saw mobile games on the Nokia 6110. That multiplayer Snakes version was fantastic, and we figured this is going to be huge. We just had no clue it would take 10, 15 years for it to become huge. So it was really a lot of struggling with some great ideas, but we're very technical. We all came from Royal Institute of Technology, and nobody had really a clue about business at the time. But we kind of figured that out, that we needed that when we ran out of money. So I remember this really vivid thing in the early 2000s when I've been living without any wage for the past 6 months, and it was starting to evaluate if I was going to take a job in McDonald's and support myself, or if I was going to continue doing this. And we were at a conference in Gotland, and it had been raining, and everything was very gloomy, but we had sent a a contract to a proposal to Nokia, and we sat down at a bar, and we got an SMS that we got that contract. Was huge for us then, and at that point the sun came out, and I was almost in tears for that would save the company for another 2 years, and we started working very closely with Nokia. That's one of my absolute highlights. Another of those moments is, I would say, later now with King in November 2012, when the mobile version of Candy Crush was released, and we started seeing the numbers the first weekend. That was also one of those moments that you will probably never forget in your life. We made an internal bet in the team on what kind of numbers we were expecting, and I was 10 times under that number already very early on.
Well, we'll talk about that soon. But what about like a low point? Because as an indie guy, sometimes the low points just seem so low, and you're wondering why am I doing this?
Yeah, I really agree. When you are an entrepreneur, you invest so much, not only money, but also your time and your passion in something. And so the low points can be really terrible. And I've heard a couple of great leaders talk about how depressed they become when the company is doing bad. And I really, that's why every time I meet entrepreneurs, I'm amazed that they do this and that they keep doing it. And it's great. We need those type of people to create great companies.
Keep going, yeah. Okay, cool. So then let's shift a little bit to King. So Fabrication Games King bought Fabrication Games. What is King? What was it? Or what is it now?
So King has been around for 11 years now, and it's also a lot of the original founders, almost all of them are still working very actively in the company. They originally came from a Swedish startup, another startup called Spray, and we're working a lot with cool web ideas. And then,
what was the vision with King when it started? Because it looks like it changed.
Yeah, it's changed a couple of times, but it's been focusing a lot about games, and these casual skill games was something that King was doing for quite some time, and actually was leading in that small segment.
It was a website, just a website.
No, well, it was a platform that was, games that was distributed with a lot of partners, like Yahoo Games, for instance. And these skill games are games that you would bet $1 on your result, and you would be matched against somebody on equal skills. And if you win, you get $1.80 back, for instance.
Wow, that's legal?
Yes, but there's a lot of regulation on that type. It's different in different regions, but this is something that was fairly big at the time.
So how many employees are there now at King?
Currently, we have more than 800 employees in 11 different offices. We're 7 different studios, and the studios are where we have game development going on. So we obviously have a big studio in Stockholm and in Malmö.
Why Sweden? So expensive. It's like €7 for a Coke.
Yes, it's very expensive. There was a really good session on Nordic Game Conference from David Pohlfeldt about, he was speaking why Sweden was such a good hub. And one of the things he said was that it's actually very expensive, so we need to develop tools to automate a lot of the really boring stuff. And he said that was one of the good reasons for the success. I found that to be interesting. But maybe the fact that it's very expensive, even to hire people, makes it important to be streamlined, to be few people doing it and doing it really well.
That's an interesting point. So how were King's earlier games conceived? And like they had hundreds of games, right?
Yeah. So the website now has more than 200 games, and they are very small teams. They come. The concepts can come from many different directions. We have these sessions where we just do hackathons and brainstorm on concepts, and it's very small teams with just 2-3 people working for a really short period of time to take something from idea to a game concept that we can have players testing, and that's really important. A part of the success for King that we have been able to eliminate a little bit of the risk of taking, half of the company working on somebody's idea. Instead, here we can have a small, agile team doing something that we can try and actually get some numbers on how it works.
Okay, we'll talk more about that a little later.
Right.
I just want to talk more about King and kind of like what's going on in King. One of the things I noticed that sometimes King's artwork is really out there. What are your thoughts on? By out there, I mean it's kind of has a unique look or something like that. How do you think the visual aspect of a game affects it? Does it?
You said that the artwork sometimes was bad earlier. Now you.
Wait, when did I say that?
No, but
when we met before, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that if you look at those 200 games that we have there, I mean they are varying quality because they've been produced for a really long time period. Now I think that the games that come out of King now have a more consistent type of polish, I would say. But there is also one important thing to note is that we really try to make the game teams own their product. So if they want to go in a certain direction, they should be allowed to do that. So and that I think is really an important strength, that it's not so hierarchical. That's also something rather typically Scandinavian, I would say, that it's a very flat organization.
Cool.
And
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm asking the question because the original Candy Crush game, the Flash game, it's not the best looking game, but that's interesting because it was King's most successful game on the site or something like that, right? It was in the top 5.
Yeah, the figures of the original game was really strong, and it has changed a little bit, the art style. The original art style was a little bit more gritty, I would say. It's like a French 1920 type of candy shop look and feel to it. And then when we did the Facebook version, we certainly enhanced a lot of the.
Well, so let's talk more about that. So King traditionally has games on its site. Now the site is called World Games, right? So there's all these games on that site, and those games move to Facebook and then to mobile. But the Facebook games and the mobile games are kind of tied together. So can you talk more about like the idea behind that? I mean, it seems obvious, but it's probably hard to execute having a good sync between between two different platforms.
Yeah, I mean it's one thing to in theory to do that, and then getting it right in practice is a whole different bag. And we all that's how Fabrication Games and King met originally, was on a conference, and we were presenting the same basic thoughts about what is going to be big in the future. And one of those things was, games that you could take from one platform and continue from another one. And in the early discussions, when we were looking at designing games like Candy Crush, we all wanted it to be the same game, but the input from a PC, for instance, and a mobile, and also user behavior is quite different. So that definitely was a challenge, and we took some decisions on the design there to, for instance, making sure that mobile game was available offline, which was really important, but delayed the original mobile release a little bit, I would.
Let's see. And so that was the question was that the idea was from the start that was we're gonna do Facebook games, and we're gonna put them on mobile, and they're gonna be synced. How are those games chosen for mobile? Because Bubble Witch was the first big success on Facebook, but that wasn't the first Facebook game from King. There were a couple.
Yeah, so the first Facebook game from King that was successful called Bubble Saga.
Bubble Saga, yes.
Yeah, it's also a bubble shooter, just like Bubble Witch Saga, which is rather confusing. But yeah, I mean, when we looked at the reason why Candy Crush was the first big game that we released was that we felt that it worked really well with it was few game elements enough so your fingers wouldn't be in the way. If you looked at the first version of Bubble Witch Saga we did, it gets a little bit too small for mobile phones.
Yeah, and the phone one.
So the updated Bubble Witch Saga 2 is much more.
But how do you guys pick like what games move to mobile? Is it just performance or?
Well, today we have this vision of the cross-platform that's kind of foremost, that we want to do games that work on both platforms, originally from the beginning. So, but looking at it originally, I mean, it was a process of us transitioning from online games to Facebook games to going over to these cross-platform games.
Cool. So, and then was Bubble Witch a big success, or you know, because like you said, the mobile game wasn't the best, right? It was a little bit small.
Yeah. So the original mobile game was successful, but then we had Candy Crush that came after. That was even more successful, of course. And as I said, it was a really good iPad game, the first Bubble Witch, but very small and detailed on iPhone. I also, if you look at the differences for Bubble Witch Saga 2, you'll see that we've kind of updated the colors quite a lot and then made it feel more.
Does King employ witches?
Sorry?
Does King employ witches?
It depends on who you mean, but no.
Okay. I had that written down. So let's talk about Candy Crush. So when Candy Crush came out, you said it was like a big success. And was it featured by Apple when it came out?
Not originally, to my knowledge. I mean, there's many different regions. Might be for some small. It didn't get a big feature at the time, but since it has gotten a lot of features, and we obviously work closely with both Apple and Google.
Yeah. And I don't want to press the subject too much because Candy Crush there's a lot about why it's successful and all that. But I thought it was interesting that when it came out, its success wasn't driven by Apple immediately. I think its success was driven by a lot of other factors.
Yeah, one thing that was a huge factor was, of course, that there was already a big audience on Facebook at the time, and they were actively, if you looked at the Facebook app page, you would see that they were asking about the mobile version of the game every single day and in quite big numbers. And so instantly when we released the mobile version, it was a big buzz there, and people downloaded it straight away.
Can you talk about some of the tricks you guys use between the Facebook and mobile version? Like my girlfriend would always switch devices to get more lives, or you can play on Facebook and you still have lives there, but not on Facebook and not on mobile. But those are all designs that were thought through, or no?
This combination, it's something that we talked about originally and how we wanted it. But now we see that people really do that. They kind of run out lives on one platform and go up on the other platform, which is not bad for us at all. It's something that we encourage. Cool.
I noticed when I was playing the Farm Hero Saga that there's a loop. There used to be a loop bug, so you could get infinite money. And I brought it up to one of your guys, and that was like a feature. I thought that was pretty cool. So let's talk more about some controversial things. So why isn't Candy Crush a copy of Bejeweled? Because you're getting a lot of negative press about that, and I don't think it is. I think they're just two separate games.
I especially see that a lot from kind of the hardcore community in the forums. People tend to say that. I think that one thing that they're not looking at perhaps is that match 3 games is really a genre. We had made several match 3 games before Candy Crush already, and there was also many match 3 games before Bejeweled. But these games definitely look at each other and see what's been done well and try to add new elements to it. And with Candy Crush, there is the fact that you can combine power-up candies together, which is something that is new and kind of changed.
So it's a bit of an iterative change. I mean, my philosophy is that there's no really cloning; it's always iterations. And what is maybe you could speak on behalf of King or kind of your own opinion about that idea of cloning or kind of iterations on games. Because I think some of the fabrication games, they're simple games, and it's not like you copied a solitaire game,
I think the game development community actually thrives quite a lot. That it's not so much patents and things on games, but you can look at the concept and try to improve that to something that is worthwhile for the players to get and want to play and spend their time on.
You said the word patent. Why did King cause itself all these troubles with these public copyrights on common words?
I'm not an expert on that field at all, but there's a great letter from the CEO on this open letter on the website,
yes.
Talking about those issues. And one thing that he says is that we have a policy of protect and respect. We've seen a lot of identical games, basically, that's trying to mimic being a famous brand of ours and pulling people in. And we have been trying to stop that, and one efficient way of stopping is by having a trademark, so we can say that.
So it's not that you hate independent developers, it's that you guys just there's just tricks, and there's tricks for the SEO tricks. If I call my game Candy Crush Saga, also, everyone's going to come to me and play my game.
Yeah. We've seen quite a lot of that. I saw an article in, I think it was Business Insider, that had a long list of games that was basically aiming to trick people who are familiar with the games from us.
Interesting. So, but do you think that independent games and companies matter in the current ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, that's I've come from when we had this period in the console and PC space where people were complaining a lot that there was no innovation and everything had stagnated a little bit because nobody wanted to take big risk. And I think that's a super interesting thing that the indies always do. And I love to go to the indie showcases and look at the game concept they come up with. A lot of innovations come from those type of games. So I love a thriving indie community. We also, in Sweden, we have a really strong indie scene, and King takes every opportunity we can to try to sponsor events. And
so after the IPO, King, would you say King is evil after the IPO, or what do you think?
No. I mean, it's obviously King is not a person. It's a big company, and I think that many people tend to, especially if you follow forums, you can get that feeling that people feel that way.
I mean, because I think King's a nice company. I really like the games, but I don't know what you guys have against raccoons. Because the villain in Farm here, you guys just hate raccoons or what?
No, I don't think we hate raccoons. Well, he makes for a really excellent villain. So.
Are you going to copyright the raccoons? Okay. All right, so now I wanted to move, I think we're about halfway in, so I wanted to move more about working at King, because you guys have like 100 trillion offices, right?
11.
11.
Moment, yeah.
You mentioned the agile process, and you wanted to talk more about that, and I've never heard anyone at King talk about like what happens inside. You don't have any witches there, but there must be some magic that happens. So could you talk more about like office culture and maybe in the Swedish office and others?
Yeah, that's where I'm most familiar with the office culture. I go to the other studios, but I haven't worked in them very much myself. So we typically use Scrum, 2 weeks sprints. People come together and talk as a group, as a team on what they're going to do, and we release new update and content for the game every second week. That's what we aim to do. So typically a new episode with 50 new levels, and also take a look at the old levels that when we see that people get stuck there a lot, for instance, and we do.
What languages are people speaking?
Typically in English.
So it's like everyone is, because you guys have Spanish office, German office, but it's always English.
And we also recruit a lot of non-Swedes into the Swedish office. That's one great thing with Stockholm, for instance, is that it's a good place to live. So people don't mind relocating. It's very hard with finding somewhere to live, though.
So let's talk more about the agile process. So at Signus, my company, we try to do agile, and I always tell everyone that we do, but I think anytime you ever hear about agile, it's kind of like, it's not fully agile, it's not a full process, because it's very difficult to get everyone on board to this, and one of the pieces of agile is that it's continuous improvement. So how do you guys do it? Do you physically have boards? Do you physically have physical cards?
Yeah, we do a lot of that. But it's also the teams can have their own versions of this and something that works really well for them. I think it's important to be really flexible also in your methodology.
What happens when there's two studios working together, or does that never happen?
Yeah, we definitely have the platform functionality in Sweden, for instance, that needs to be used from the other offices. So we come together several times per year, the entire company, and we also travel a lot within the studios, which is a nice benefit to go to Barcelona, for instance, to update the team on
in the winter time, right?
Changes.
And so, what about what are some weaknesses that you're trying to maybe personally, or that you're seeing?
Well, I don't know about weaknesses, but we've definitely been bottlenecks of recruiting engineers. We've been focusing a lot on recruiting and getting the studios up to speed. But that's gone fairly well, I would say. I mean, it's really impressive to see that the London studio were able to do such a great game with Farm Hero Saga in the first game that was released from there. And
what about what do you use? How do you work? What is your personal management style, or how do you keep yourself organized?
Yeah, I'm not organized at all. If you work with me, you know I'm a man of chaos. I don't have a team today that I manage. I work a little bit with design still, but I work pretty independently with that. But when I've been the CEO of Jadestone and of Fabrication Games, and I personally really like to work with people who take a lot of responsibility. So management by not managing them is my favorite idea of working. I think it's pretty Swedish as well to make sure that people have the tools and that they can fail once and hopefully they learn from that mistake and go on from that.
Okay, what do you think of Chris James?
You mean the founder of Steel Media?
Yeah.
He's a great guy.
All right, yeah, I like him. Okay, let's talk more about the market, and that this is going to be the last area. And I think it's important to look at the market because it's really changed. There's just a handful of companies that are at the top, and King is one of them. Who are King's competitors? Does King have any competitors?
It's a question that the CEO probably could answer better. I would see it very much as we're aiming to do these bite-sized games that you can pick up and play at any time, and it's basically the competition is what people use and spend on that time. We see, at least in Sweden, TV, traditional broadcast TV, is losing a lot of its audience, and I think one of the reasons is that people are more using their smartphones, and there's a lot of things there that compete on your times. Game is a great entertainment form in that way, that you can pick it up and play it for a short while and it's still meaningful, especially if you're in a social concept.
So you're talking about all these derivative things. So like you guys were trying to license products a while ago. Could you talk about how that's going?
You mean like the
yeah,
Candy
I have the Candy Crush socks.
Socks.
My mother bought them for me. Is that difficult? How's it going?
It was super interesting work. I've been involved myself with the socks, for instance. We said at King that we are primarily a games company. That's what we excel at, and that's what we're continuing to do. But we want to do things that feel meaningful for players and fans, and would be kind of bringing a smile on the faces. So we've been doing things that feel like really fun products to work with. We now have a licensing team in London, so we're
Cool.
taking that
Yeah,
more seriously.
I got some King candy. You guys got to change the formula a little bit, I think. Anyway, but what about King is great at doing these bite-sized games, like you said. But what about mid-core games? What do you think about them?
Yeah, I'm a big consumer of games myself, ranging from hardcore to midcore. But I think that when it comes to King, we're kind of aiming at doing casual social. That's where we're seeing that there is a big hunger, appetite on the market for games that you can play with your family members. And I mean, the female gamers have been really important there.
Okay, cool. And kind of the last question about the market. What about King is very slow to move to move around platforms. Like I don't think you guys had any Kindle games for a while. Recently, it's been like maybe this last year. Is there a reason for that? Are you guys hyper concentrated on, like, why aren't you on BlackBerry?
Well, you have to ask Emma there in the audience. She's working with that type of things. No, but I think it's very much again a question about where we focus. And the teams are small. We want to be everywhere, but we just can't. So we tend to do the things that players are asking for a lot.
Cool.
And maybe we haven't seen a lot of fans on BlackBerry asking for getting our games there, or the challenge of getting the games over there is too big for it to make sense. The focus the last year has been the Asian markets lot, where we opened up office in Japan and then one in Korea. And we also announced that we're working with Tencent in China. So that's been one of our focus areas.
Yeah, Candy Crush is really huge in Asia. So I wanted to wrap up, and you guys should prepare your questions, because I heard there's going to be at least 10 questions from the audience. But so what kind of the last big question is, what is your advice from your 15 plus years as an indie? What is kind of three points of advice?
I would. The first thing would be to be really passionate about what we do. You should go for something that you're passionate, because with King or with my companies, it takes a lot longer time normally than you would think. So if you want to waste 15 years of your time, you better do it with something that you really love doing. So that would be my strong advice. If you're passionate about making games, then that's a good area to work in.
All right, cool. So
also with indies now, I think that the mobile games market is in many ways very democratic. You definitely have the option to be and compete with the big companies, but you also need to do that. You need to grasp analytics and also marketing, which is two big areas on the side of making great games.
That's true. Cool. Was that 3?
Yeah,
I think it was.
I think so.
Okay. So okay, I have never interviewed anybody, and I always wanted to ask somebody these famous questions. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. You have to answer them with your first thought. So what's your favorite word?
There would be a Swedish word, webbservertillämpningsprogrammering, which means
that's one word.
That's one word. It's a web server application programming. That's a course I created in Royal Institute of Technology, and I met a lot of the guys that I still work with at King. There, we were studying, making big scalable server systems.
So what's the least favorite word? Please, it has to be even longer.
No, I'm very. I would say no. Is that I'm a very positive person in general, and I tend to forget everything that is negative. and I don't like to work with people who are negative.
What turns you on? Come on, candy, dogs.
My fiance, and here in the audience.
What turns you off?
God, I don't know.
Clash of Clans.
No, I can't think of anything right now.
Okay, so you're okay.
No, I'm always on.
You know, I don't know how old you are, but what sound or noise do you like?
I'm actually on my spare time. I'm a nature person right now, so I really enjoy like forest and bird squeaks and that.
That's nice. What noise do you hate? What sound or noise do you hate?
It's tough. Airplane noise. I spend a lot of times on airplanes
I know that noise.
lately,
Okay.
which is
What is your favorite curse word?
jävlar. It's also a Swedish
You don't
word.
have to translate. There's young people. Okay. What profession other than your own would you want to try?
I was when I was young. Once upon a time, I took the kind of career decision either to go for programming or for art, and I always wondered how I would work as an artist. I actually did art to a few of the early game concepts, and they did look terrible. So maybe it's good that I didn't go into that.
What profession would you not like to try?
To work in like the cashier of McDonald's that I seriously considered when I was struggling too much with my entrepreneurship.
So we're almost ready for questions. When you die, what do you want your game over screen to say?
Sorry, my
your game over screen.
Yeah. Try again.
Okay, so we have like a few minutes. Anyone have any questions? Wait. I'll repeat the question if I can hear you. So the question is, did Fabrication Games have an early iteration of Candy Crush? And if no, then why did King buy Fabrication Games?
No, so very good question. So Candy Crush came about at King before there was the web game first in 2011, which was just a simple one-level game. And the Facebook version was being started to develop when we joined King in early 2012. We had the game engine for the cross-platform and mobile and tablet functionality, and we also had a kind of an expert team on developing for mobile games. And so we were two very good puzzle components together. We felt that we didn't have the skill set at all on the social side and everything else that was needed. We were just a small team, just 20 people focusing on mobile and mobile technology.
Yes.
What features have you tried in Candy Crush that didn't work out? What mistakes have you made you wouldn't repeat again?
What mistakes did you make in Candy Crush that you don't want to repeat again?
Yeah, so I've gotten this question before, and I got booed when I said that,
There were no mistakes.
Yeah, but basically the stars were very much aligned with Candy Crush Saga. There is not a whole lot of things that went wrong when looking back and seeing that it became the world's biggest game, and then we're kind of a little bit humbled to how everything connected so well with timing and everything. I did go back to the team and I asked them, what would you say was the biggest mistakes? And some of the things that came up was from the original Flash version that was made by one programmer in 2011. That code base was actually continued and integrated into the bigger Facebook game. So there was a inheritance of old code, and that guy who made the original code wasn't even in the project. It would be much faster to throw that away and rebuild it. But that was a big thing that they mentioned. Another thing was the fact that there's two different teams between the Facebook version and a mobile version made that we actually had like the games were calculating scores differently in each platform at some point. So what we did then is kind of move the team together and implemented the same bugs in the mobile version that was in the Facebook version, so they will calculate in the same way.
That's crazy. Guy with the glasses.
Yeah. Hi. Have you ever played a Zynga game?
Have you ever played a Zynga game?
A little bit. I've played Formal, the first one.
Okay. Do you have a broad opinion of the product?
Do you have an opinion on the Zynga games?
I think that there's obviously a lot of really talented people at Zynga, and we've some of them are now working at King, and they. I mean, no, I don't have a lot of opinions. It's very tricky to be another company and talking about someone else. But obviously there is a lot of passionate people there that I know and I've met a little bit. But it's also quite a big company, so it's hard to say it's, something in general about them.
We worked on some Zynga games, Tommy.
You did? Yeah? You have any opinion on?
I can't say which ones though, because I'll get like a cease and desist for speaking. But I liked it. It was nice. Everything was good. Great people.
Quick question. Alex from Tiny Mob Games. So you've been doing games for a long time, 15 years. King's been doing it for at least a decade. There's been really good games that have been created. Like Candy Crush was magic. There was magic in Candy Crush. What companies generally have trouble doing is, once they create magic, is how do you recreate that magic again in kind of a different game, different environment, different mechanic. What are you guys doing to recreate the magic again that you've had with Candy Crush Saga?
Yeah, thank you. We have been giving the game teams a lot of space to work on their concepts and making sure that they make the best possible game they can. I think today we're already seeing that that's working really well. If you look at the top charts, it's not only Candy Crush. There's definitely like Bubble Witch 2 is a game that I'm playing a lot myself. Coming on the plane over here, I was spent a lot of time with that. So I think that our idea is to make sure that we come up with a lot of new game concepts in an early phase and try them, and then try to take them and make them into casual social game where we see that there is a lot of interest from people around the world. Today we have 352 million unique users, which is a humbling number to say the least. And it's I mean, these people are hungry for new content. It's not like they play the game and they don't want to do it again. They love the concept of having something to spend their time with in between, the bus rides home or in the US you don't ride a bus, right? You typically sit in the car. Hopefully you won't play the game while you're driving a car, but we see a lot of people at work playing games on their computer, for instance.
At your work?
Yeah, that's also a part of working at King, that you get to play the games on work.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, last question. Somebody ask them how much money they make.
So I think apart from magic formula and a great game concept, another aspect of making a successful game is user acquisition. So for user acquisition, what do you think plays a bigger part? PR, ads, Facebook, viral, or just game cross promotion from your own games?
Thank you. That's a very good question. What we've said is that the biggest channel for Candy Crush is people showing it to their friends and persuading them that this is a really good game and that they should download it. Other than that, we're obviously doing some advertising and PR. And we feel that a broad approach has worked best for us to do work with Facebook, work with PR, work with advertising, and all these things comes together really nicely. It's one difficult thing with marketing is that it's not a linear equation. You can't start with $100 and expect to have double the result if you go in with $200. The stakes are pretty high, but once you get to that point where we do a lot of where you have visibility, a lot of people become aware of the game and the brand. We also now we see that the cross-platform works really well for us when we have a popular concept. People knows the brand King and want to play similar games, so that's an important factor, which wasn't an important factor as much in Candy Crush in those days, because that was kind of our first big game.
Hey, all right, I think we're done, or no? Do we have time? So Tommy will be here, and he's a nice guy. You should talk to him. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.